All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. Going to keep the show super simple today. We're just going to do an instant reaction to each of last night's 3 games. The Dallas Mavericks going on the road and beating Denver on a huge shot by Dorian Finney-Smith late. The Los Angeles Lakers lose to the Cavs. Kind of a disappointing game because Anthony Davis goes out with flu-like symptoms early on, and then all of a sudden you're trying to beat a really good team on the road without your best player. And then the Miami Heat, without Jimmy Butler, got their butt kicked by a terrible Detroit Pistons game. We'll touch on that as well. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Volume's YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. That's also where I live tweet through some games and put some video footage breakdowns as well. And then last but not least, if for whatever reason you guys miss one of these videos and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish, remember you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Well, so back and forth shot making at the end of this game came down to a couple of double teams. Nikola Jokic posting up on the left block. Dallas sends a double, generates a wide open 3 for Bruce Brown. He knocks it down. They go the other way. Luka Doncic runs a pick and pop with Dorian Finney-Smith. Nice little behind the back feed. An interesting decision that Denver decided instead of running to Dorian Finney-Smith, they ran to Spencer Dinwiddie on the right wing. I think I would have rather had Spencer take that shot, especially with how well Dorian Finney-Smith was shooting. He knocks it down. Jokic goes down, draws a foul, but he misses a free throw. Then pretty much the game is over. This game really came down to a 3-point shot result. Denver was better in a bunch of different phases of the game. They were better on the glass. They were better in the paint. They shot better from the field. They had more assists, but the Mavericks were 17 for 36 from 3, and that was enough to get the job done. The big guy that got going, here in this last week and a half for Dallas, which has really changed the outlook of their entire season, is Tim Hardaway Jr. If you remember, we talked about this the night they beat the Warriors. Tim got off to a horrific shooting start this season. Not entirely uncommon. He was dealing with foot issues last year. I actually broke my foot myself between 2 seasons when I was playing in college and had a nightmare shooting first half of the season before I really got my confidence back. It's just your base is so important as a shooter. That's where you get your lift. That's how you convert different footwork into high-quality shots, whether that's movement shooting or off-the-dribble shooting or anything along those lines. And you just everything's just a little bit funky when you're coming back from foot injuries. And then also when you get away from NBA basketball for a while, there's a rhythm and a speed that you have to grow accustomed to get back to where you feel comfortable on the basketball court as a shooter. And he got going early in that Golden State Warriors game. And in the 5 games since then, Tim Hardaway Jr. is averaging 24 points per game, shooting 55% from 3 on 11 attempts. He's been a net positive in every single game in plus minus, and the Mavs are 4-1 in those games. And if you remember, I think one of the big reasons why Dallas let Jalen Brunson go is they were under the opinion that Tim Hardaway Jr. could kind of slot into that third creator role because he does have a little bit of that higher level off the dribble creation, and he's starting to flash that a lot in this last 5 games. He's shooting 52% on 4 pull-up jump shots per game, including 8 for 11 on pull-up threes. Overall on the season, although it's in really low volume, he's averaging 1.14 points per isolation possession, which is in the 85th percentile. So they might need to get a little bit more on-ball reps for Tim Hardaway Jr. now that he's got his rhythm and see if maybe that helps them. But him getting going offensively completely changes this basketball team. Remember, the Mavericks were really struggling mainly on the offensive end of the floor. Their defense has been pretty good even through their struggles when they went below 500 briefly there. Another huge driving force behind Luka's recent success, although he had a nightmare shooting night last night against Denver, but Luka's starting to shoot the ball better off the dribble. He started the year like he does most seasons really poorly with his step-back jump shot. That step-back 3 is such an athletic move. It doesn't seem like it because it seems like settling, but kind of like we were talking about earlier with Tim Hardaway Jr., you need to get a ton of lift on a shot like that, especially when you're stepping back. And so it can be a thing that requires conditioning and rhythm to really get going. He's taken 47 pull-up threes during this 5-game stretch, and he's made 23 of them, which is 49%. So him getting going there is obviously helping them a lot as well on the offensive end of the floor. That's bumped up his ISO numbers. So he's up to 284 points on 256 ISOs this year, which is in the 79th percentile. And he's doing a really nice job in pick and roll and pick and pop. So many teams are starting to double or hard hedge on all these Luka pick and rolls. It's just their teams are coming to terms with the fact that Dallas doesn't have a ton of dribble creation outside of Luka, and that their best bet to win is to double him. That really wasn't the case last year. Last year, with how much dribble creation they were getting from Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie, a lot of times it made sense to stay home and turn Luka into a scorer. But teams are more willing to send extra attention to Luka and force him to be a passer, and he's been doing a really nice job there. He's up to 563 points on 502 pick and rolls this year. That's 1.12 points per possession, which is in the 88th percentile, which is not only amazing from efficiency, but that's just absurd volume. That's basically where they're getting the vast majority of their offense. Denver tried a really interesting coverage last night that actually worked pretty well on Luka that I'd like to see some other teams try. It's kind of like a bracket ISO coverage. So most teams don't want you to get middle penetration because of the fact that when you get middle penetration, it's a lot harder for the defense to rotate out of it. And the corner, you try to funnel teams towards the corner, but one of the bad things there is those corner jump shots are a little bit easier because they're shorter distance, right? And most NBA role players just rep out tons and tons of corner threes because that's the easiest shot that you can get from three-point range in the game. So what I thought was really interesting was Denver, when Luka would get these ISOs on the wing, whether it was right wing or left wing, they were actually shading him heavily towards the middle. And then whoever it was that was at the top of the key, if they were in a 5-out, or on the opposite wing, if they were in a 4-out, that defender would dig down almost like one dribble away from where Luka would get downhill. And the problem is a lot of these Mavericks shooters have a little bit of a slow release, and they need to be comfortable and have lots of time to gather. And so they were having some success, like forcing Luka to drive right into that extra defender, kick out, and then he could easily close out and dissuade the three. It was kind of like you could see them hard bracketing because that on-ball defender is hard on his, sideline shoulder, and then that help defender is just sitting right there in that driving lane. I'd like to see some more teams try that specifically to try to slow them down. Denver's defense continues to be a huge problem. They are 26th in the league now. After last night, that's bottom 5 defense in the league. As a result, they're really struggling with the good teams in the league. They're 5-7 against teams that are 500 and better. Kind of reminds me of Sacramento. We were talking about this earlier. They score a shit ton of points. They beat up on the bad teams in the league, but Sacramento is 6-8 versus teams that are 500 or better. That defensive piece is so vital to any good team being able to beat other good teams. This is why there's that stat that goes around every year where if you're not a top 10 defense, you really don't have a chance to win a title historically in the NBA. Why? Defense travels. Role players feel comfortable at home, so it's hard to win on the road. But the one thing that certainly travels on the road is your defense, because it's just about athleticism and playing hard and much less about, things going your way, so to speak. Defense keeps games close. So as you struggle, look at, the Lakers countless time this season have been close in games just because they defend well for certain stretches, especially when Anthony Davis is available. So it travels, it keeps games close, and it closes games. When you get into crunch time situations, you need to be able to get stops. And once again, Denver last night could not get stops. And what's confusing about it is they added Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown specifically to help with that, and it just hasn't been enough. All right, moving on to the Lakers and the Cavs. So AD leaves, a few minutes into his first shift with flu-like symptoms. It's really unfortunate because, in a normal season, guy goes out with the flu, you don't think twice about it. But this is a Laker team that dug themselves in a 2-10 hole. When you dig yourself in that big of a hole, these losses are that much more painful. If it's like we were talking about with the Clippers yesterday. They've had all this bad health luck, but they're sitting there at 14-11 or whatever it is that they are. It's like you can weather that storm when you've won enough games to remain, in a decent position within the standings. The Lakers dug themselves in a hole, and so now when Anthony Davis leaves a winnable game on the road against Cleveland, with LeBron and Russ playing as well as they are, and with getting enough defensively to win these types of games, that's a loss that hurts you more because of where you're at in the standings. You could be 11-12 today, or you could be 10-13, and you lost a player to flu-like symptoms. It hurts you in the standings. Jared Allen was an absolute monster in this game. He torched the Lakers in the short roll. There was this dynamic that was taking place, and we're going to talk about the Lakers starters here in a minute, but when they start Dennis and Pat, you expect them to be excellent defensively, and you specifically expect them to be great chasing guards over the top of screens in pick and roll. But what was happening in this game was they were getting caught on those screens. And because Cleveland was running two bigs, whichever big LeBron ended up on, whether it was mostly Jared Allen, but sometimes it was Evan Mobley, whichever big LeBron ended up on, they would just call him up into the screen. Because obviously LeBron is a good defensive player, but he's not in the same stratosphere as Anthony Davis as a drop coverage big. So what would happen is those guards, Pat Beverly and Dennis Schroeder, would get caught on those screens. The guard would get downhill. LeBron would have to step up to contain the basketball. Then it's a drop-off pass to Jared Allen for a dunk or a floater or a short jump shot every single time down the floor. And that's the advantage of having Anthony Davis. And this is why, after last night, you've got to, at least see a little bit more my case for why Anthony Davis has been the defensive player of the year to this point. But Anthony Davis has such freak physical tools that he can kind of be in both places at once, which solves a lot of those problems. LeBron is not that guy. He's a little bit more of a one-place type of defender, right? He steps over to help. Jared Allen's getting all these layups. If you're going to start Dennis Schroeder and Patrick Beverly, especially with their offensive limitations as shooters, you need them to be excellent defensively, and they just weren't last night. But Jared Allen, I have these moments, and I've talked about this before on the show, because of what he does offensively. I have these moments where I think he's a better player than Rudy Gobert. And then I sent out a tweet. I was like, hey, who would you guys rather have on your basketball team, Rudy Gobert and Jared Allen? And last I checked, it was 90-10 in favor of Jared Allen, which might be a little too ridiculous. And I know there's a lot of anti-Gobert sentiment out there, but there's some real legitimacy to that case because of how much better he is than Rudy offensively. He's super crafty around the rim. He's got great touch with his floater, but also with that little short jump shot you saw him breaking out yesterday. He can score against switches in post-ups, and he's got a really good instinct for relocation in the dunker spot. We went over this, I can't remember which day it was, but it was in the last couple of weeks. We went over the different dunker spot responsibilities. So if you're in the dunker spot opposite of the basketball and the ball crosses the midline, you have to relocate towards the other block, right? Because you always want to make that big man step up and leave you. Whereas if you're on the same side as the ball, he can be in two places at once, right? But what Jared Allen was doing really nice last night too is that other piece of dunker spot relocation that I talked about that day, which is when you drive baseline, you need to relocate up to the top, almost like at the charge circle, where you can give yourself a release valve, like a bounce pass in the lane for a short little floater. And he always knows where to position himself to get those easy opportunities. Jared Allen has scored 72 points on 55 roll man possessions this season, which is in the 69th percentile. I thought he dominated this basketball game every bit as much as Donovan Mitchell did. Grabbed a bunch of offensive rebounds. The Laker guards were spooked every time they got into the lane. And then, like I said, he scored almost every time he caught it in the roll. Austin Reeves got the Donovan Mitchell assignment last night, and Mitchell just completely had his way with him. Austin is a positional defender. He's not aggressive on the ball. He gives ground and forces you to shoot over the top of him. That's what makes him generally a positive defender, depending on the matchup. But Donovan Mitchell is so damn quick that positional defense doesn't work because he can just get around his shoulder, and then he can't give too much ground because Donovan's such a good pull-up jump shooter. But, that dynamic just becomes really difficult without Anthony Davis. That responsibility changes if Anthony Davis is out there. If Anthony Davis is out there, you don't even have to worry about the rim necessarily. You just have to take away those pull-up jump shots and the pull-up mid-range shots, right? That simplifies Austin's role. It may be an achievable task for him at that point. But you take Anthony Davis out of the equation, all of a sudden it's not an achievable task. That's not something Austin's physically capable of doing. No disrespect to Austin, that's something the vast majority of defensive players in the NBA would be incapable of doing. And Donovan Mitchell's just playing at a ridiculous level right now. I've had a lot of people compare Austin Reeves to Alex Caruso over the years, and I think they're pretty equal overall as players. I think Austin's a significantly better offensive player, but Alex Caruso is a significantly better defensive player, and he might have had a better chance in a matchup like that. But overall, I thought the Lakers hung pretty tough. Thought it was an impressive effort, if you really factor in AD being out, and then they shot like absolute shit. and we're going to get to that shooting thing here in a little bit. One last guy on the Cavs I wanted to shout out was Karis LeVert. He only had 7 points, but he generated a ton of quality shots. Looking at the Lakers, poor shooting has been a story all year this year, but it's starting to become a problem specifically with the starters. So the Lakers starting lineup, what you saw last night, Patrick Beverley, Dennis Schroeder with Lonnie Walker, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis, they have a -10 net rating, albeit in a somewhat small sample size this year because Dennis Schroeder only recently came back. But a big part of it is just stagnation and a lack of shooting. Starting Patrick Beverley and Dennis Schroeder makes some sense in theory. I talked about it a lot this summer as a lineup that I actually thought made some sense. But at the time, I thought Patrick Beverley would be able to knock down some threes. And Patrick Beverley is having such a horrific shooting season that whole lineup is just falling apart from a functionality standpoint. LeBron and AD are trying to make things happen, but the teams are packing the paint. And the best shot they can get is these kickouts to Dennis Schroeder and Patrick Beverley, and they're just not making them. I think that starting lineup went like 1 for 5 on threes with those two in that opening shift last night. And next thing you know, you've spotted the other team another big lead. And one of the things that's nice is when they go to Russell Westbrook, they take, some of the non-shooting out, and Russ kind of gets that pace going and starts getting downhill. I'd rather have them go with guys like Austin Reeves and Troy Brown Jr. in the starting lineup at this point with the way they're playing, or maybe just Dennis Schroeder. That way it's a little bit more of a functional group, and then you just basically put the onus on LeBron James and Anthony Davis to be aggressive the way that Russ is being with that second unit. Patrick Beverley has been so incredibly bad this year, and Darvin Ham is clearly very loyal to him, that a trade may be the only way to save Darvin Ham from himself a little bit there, because we've seen such a large sample size over a quarter of the season now that he's just not helping the team really. At least with Dennis Schroeder, he's giving you some scoring pop, and he's got some good chemistry with Anthony Davis in pick and roll. I think you can get away with starting Schroeder. I just don't think you can get away with starting both of those guys. But let's pay attention really quickly to, because this game was 92-92 in the fourth quarter. How is it that the Lakers stayed close in this game? They stayed close because LeBron James and Russell Westbrook are both playing damn good basketball right now. Like, Anthony Davis has been the best player on the team, maybe even the best player in the world over these last 3 weeks, but it goes deeper than that. LeBron and Russ are also playing great basketball right now as shot creators. But despite them generating a ton of high-quality shots, the Lakers, especially last night, have just been unable to finish off those plays. Last night on spot-up possessions, if you thought it looked like the Lakers were missing a ton of shots, the Lakers scored 0.44 points per spot-up possession last night. It's just going to be hard to win on nights like that. Looking at Russ, specifically because of how good he's been lately, I just wanted to kind of zoom out and talk about where I'm at with Russ right now. I think he's been more than good enough to justify keeping him unless the perfect deal arises. I thought it was a ridiculous gamble from Rob Pelinka to do so, to keep him. But credit to Russ. He's just been a much better player this year. It sounds weird because I was so critical of Russ last year, but again, it was never personal with me and Russ. I don't dislike the guy. It's a simple question of analyzing basketball games. Last year, Russ played horrifically bad on most nights. This year, Russ has been pretty good on most nights and great on others. In that case, it changes the entire dynamic. Again, I thought it was a reckless gamble, but that gamble appears to have worked out for Rob Pelinka. He's just been an outstanding shot creator this year. So in pick and roll, he scored 263 points on 264 possessions, which is in the 59th percentile, so just slightly above average. In ISO, 109 points on 104 possessions, which is in the 67th percentile, so top third, right? And then in post-ups, and this is where he's been amazing, 61 points on 41 possessions, which is in the 98th percentile. 24 for 36 from the field is what he's shooting in post-ups. He scored on 2 post-ups again last night. He's scoring on bigger defenders down there too, which is just a testament to how much strength he has. So you actually now have to seriously weigh what it looks like to lose Russ and what specifically you'd be getting back. What he's doing generating quality spot-up opportunities for the role players is super valuable. So now you have to weigh that against what you're bringing back. So I'd keep it on the table because there are still a lot of redundancies, especially with LeBron. When LeBron and Russ are on the floor together this year, it's been pretty bad. In 571 possessions, which is a huge sample size, they are minus 6 points per 100 possessions. So there are some issues there, but he's been really good off the bench. So you can still have that option on the table trading Russ, but it needs to be a great deal. You can be more picky about that. So what I would do is I would kind of treat this as a two-phase trade season. I think right now, the Lakers need to move Patrick Beverley, Kendrick Nunn, in another minimum contract, someone like Damian Jones, with one of the picks for somebody that can help you right away. Then you hang on to that other option, which is Russ, and another one of the picks around the trade deadline should something pop up or should things go south with Russ. That's when you look at that potentially as an option. The question becomes, who do you target? Do you target someone like Miles Turner, who I think is actually the best player available overall this season that I've seen mentioned in trades? Or do you target someone that's a wing? And really, to me, it just comes down to who that wing is. Because in theory, good center, good wing presents you with the issue of, do you want to raise your ceiling or do you want to have a better chance of competing on nights without Anthony Davis? Because if you go big, if you go with someone like Miles Turner, you have a much better chance of winning that game against the Cavs. You give yourself a legit AD at the 4 look, which the Lakers don't really have this year. That would be more similar to what they had in 2020, right? But then you have the crunch time issues. Do you want to close with Miles Turner? I think Miles Turner's ability to shoot from the perimeter makes him a player that can close, but it's at least a debate there. With a legit wing, you still struggle on nights where Anthony Davis goes out. You have some issues with depth, but that ultimate ceiling gets bigger because then you have some of those lineups that resemble the 2020 Lakers when they put AD at the 5, when they'd have LeBron at the 4 and another big wing. But it really just depends on how good that wing is, because a average wing or a below average wing, even if that functionally makes more sense, if he's not nearly as good at basketball as Miles Turner overall, then the center becomes a better option. That's why I keep an eye out if things go really south for Washington on Kyle Kuzma. Again, it's a long shot. You might even have to throw in 2 picks for something like that. But if you could somehow get Kyle Kuzma, now you suddenly become such a big lineup with AD at the 5 that allows you to potentially capture some of that two-way ceiling that you had in 2020. So again, that's a super long shot, and a lot of things would have to break right. But those are the 2 different directions that the Lakers are going to have to look at. Looking at Miles Turner as a clear, floor-raising move that helps you like in the standings during the regular season, or targeting a wing, which is more of like a ceiling-raising deal. So the Detroit Pistons were 2-11 before they went into Miami last night. If you guys remember, I talked a lot about how specifically when they lost PJ Tucker, that the Miami Heat were going to really struggle any night that either Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo misses, because when one of those guys are out, they just become a comically small basketball team. And Jimmy Butler was out last night. Bam Adebayo had to play the 5, especially in crunch time with like 4 guards. And even some of your taller players like Tyler Herro or Duncan Robinson that get out there are not good defensive players that aren't really physically imposing on the basketball game. They're going to really struggle. And what do you know? The Detroit Pistons lit them on fire, blew them out. In that fourth quarter, lots of shot making over the top, like Sadiq Bey posting up Victor Oladipo and just getting an easy basket, or Alec Burks hitting a pull-up jump shot. Corey Joseph attacking Tyler Herro in ISO. And, this whole situation is starting to remind me of the Lakers a little bit, where there's a clear need and they have the means with which to make an upgrade. But they're being really picky about trying to find the right guy. But in the process, you're sacrificing ground in the standings. And that's that delicate balance. Like the Lakers might be able to be like, hey, look, Russell Westbrook looks better. Or, hey, look at this guy we got in this trade. That's a better thing than what was being thrown out this summer. Okay, cool, but where are you in the standings? Because how much does that matter if you end up in a 7-game like slugfest with the Golden State Warriors or the Phoenix Suns in the first round, and you're banged up and you end up losing to somebody else in the second round? Like at a certain point, you've got to factor in like ground in the standings when you're talking about these kinds of things. And the Miami Heat just simply need front court depth. And Jimmy Butler, for as long as he's been in the league, has been in and out of the lineup. And so he's probably going to continue to be in and out of the lineup. And if you don't fix that problem, it's going to be an issue throughout the season, and you might find yourself in the play-in tournament at that point. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate your support. We will be back tomorrow with another show, and I will see you guys then.